The Grand Oak was alive with its usual Friday night energy, polished executives, influencers capturing the perfect shot of their golden-plated desserts, and families upholding their weekly traditions. Among them sat a man in a simple gray polo shirt and casual pants, quietly sipping his whiskey in a corner booth. Most of the veteran staff recognized him, but ever since he bought the restaurant 6 months ago, he had given clear instructions: treat me like any other customer. To him, the true measure of a restaurant wasn't how it treated celebrities but how it welcomed ordinary people. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. By the way, what city are you watching us from? Write it in the comments, we're curious. Rachel, the newest waitress, knew nothing of this. Fresh out of an elite hospitality school, she was eager to make a name for herself. She spent her shifts flattering social media figures while casting dismissive glances at those she deemed unworthy of such a prestigious establishment. From across the room, Thomas, the seasoned manager, observed with growing concern. He had seen that look before. Rachel had given it to an elderly retired surgeon just last week for not wearing formal shoes. But tonight, her judgment would lead to consequences beyond her imagination. As the soft click of Rachel's heels approached the man's table, the veteran staff sensed trouble brewing. Clint, ever composed, took another sip of his whiskey, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Sir, I couldn't help but notice you've been enjoying quite a few drinks," Rachel said, her tone dripping with artificial concern. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the bar." She gestured subtly toward the pristine white tablecloth, reserved for important guests. Miguel, a young busboy who had emigrated from Mexico 2 years earlier, overheard the conversation. He knew exactly who the man in the polo shirt was. He had watched all of Clint Eastwood's films with his father as a child. His grip tightened around his cleaning cloth as he struggled to stay silent. Clint remained unfazed. "I'm comfortable right here," he replied evenly. Rachel glanced at her watch before shifting her focus to a group of young tech executives waiting by the entrance. "Sir, our executive chef has prepared an exclusive menu," she continued, her discomfort at Clint's casual attire evident. From a nearby table, an older couple, longtime regulars for 20 years, watched, uneasy. The husband considered stepping in, but his wife placed a gentle hand on his arm, recognizing the quiet intensity in Clint's eyes. "I'm well aware of the prices," Clint said, his voice steady. A familiar tone, one that had commanded respect in countless films. Rachel's forced smile faltered. Irritated, she flipped open her notepad. "Then I suppose I should explain the menu slowly for you." Her words carried a condescending edge, her impatience showing. Miguel, no longer able to stay silent, took a step forward. "Miss Rachel, perhaps you should call Thomas." But Rachel wasn't listening. Her voice grew louder, ensuring that those nearby could hear. "This isn't just any restaurant. This is the Grand Oak. Maybe in your time, things were different, but we have standards now." A silence fell over the room. Clint set his whiskey down, not hastily, not aggressively, but with a deliberate motion that commanded attention. A few older patrons recognized the gesture. "In my time?" Clint repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," Rachel snapped. "Back when people could just walk in, dress however they wanted, order the cheapest thing on the menu, and take up space meant for real guests." Thomas, now fully aware of the situation, hurried forward. Miguel stood frozen, his heart pounding. Clint considered Rachel's words before speaking. "Luxury," he mused. "And what exactly does that mean to you?" Rachel straightened. "It means understanding that some places aren't for everyone." She gestured toward the young executives taking selfies with their extravagant meals. "They respect what the Grand Oak represents. They don't come here pretending to be something they're not." Thomas paled. The veteran staff exchanged glances. The irony was suffocating. Clint let out a quiet chuckle. Interesting choice of words. Rachel, emboldened by what she assumed was victory, continued, "I've tried to be polite, but clearly, you don't belong here. This isn't the set of one of your old cowboy movies. This is a prestigious establishment, and I don't want you ruining the experience for our real guests." A gasp rippled through the room. Miguel's sponge fell to the floor with an audible thud. The older couple tensed. Clint exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and spoke calmly, "Jerry, bring me the ownership papers. Now." He ended the call and turned back to Rachel. "You see, Rachel," he said, his voice still calm but carrying a weight that made her stomach drop, "for the past 6 months, I've sat at this exact table, drinking the same whiskey. Do you know why?" Rachel, now visibly pale, shook her head. "Because I own this restaurant," Clint said. "And not for the prestige. Not for the modern luxury. But because for 50 years, the Grand Oak stood for something real. A place where hospitality meant treating everyone with respect, regardless of how they dressed or how many followers they had." The room fell into a stunned silence. A moment later, Jerry, the restaurant's accountant, arrived, carrying a leather-bound portfolio. He nodded to Clint and placed it in front of him. Rachel's notepad slipped from her fingers. Clint leaned back. "Let me tell you a story," he said, gesturing toward the restaurant. 50 years ago, I walked into this place for the first time. I wasn't famous. No one wore polo shirts like this. But the owner back then, old Mr. Thompson, treated me like I was the most important guest he had. Not because of who I was, but because that's how he treated everyone." He took another sip of whiskey before continuing, "When his son decided to sell the place, I bought it. Not to turn it into some social media playground, but to preserve that." Miguel stood taller. The older couple nodded in agreement. Even the influencers put their phones down. Clint met Rachel's gaze. "The question isn't whether I belong here. The question is whether you understand what this place really stands for." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. The weight of her mistake settled over her. But what happened next shocked everyone, including her. "I could fire you right now," Clint said. "But that wouldn't teach you anything." He turned to Miguel. "This young man recognized me. Not because of social media, but because he watched my films with his father. He understands something you don't: respect isn't about appearances." Clint looked back at Rachel. "So, you have a choice. You can walk out that door and find a job at a place that values modern luxury. Or you can stay and learn from Miguel and the veteran staff what true hospitality means. The decision is yours." Rachel swallowed hard. She looked around at the serious yet dignified expressions of the staff. Then, after a moment, she straightened her posture and whispered, "I'd like to stay and learn, sir. If you'll let me." "Good choice," Clint said, finishing his whiskey. Thomas assigned Miguel to oversee Rachel's training, and as the tension in the room melted away, a slow applause started, from the older couple, then the influencers, then the entire restaurant. Not for the celebrity in their midst, but for the lesson they had just witnessed. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video to show your support.